The death toll of the Palestinians has risen to more than 120 martyrs, and 1,000 citizens have been injured since the beginning of the Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. Among the martyrs are 26 children and 10 women. Israeli guns have not spared even worshipping places, as 25 mosques in Gaza have been reportedly targeted since the beginning of the war on the Strip. The spokesman of the Ministry of Health at the deposed Palestinian government in Gaza declared that hospitals in the Strip are running short of medicines and medical requirements due to the increasing numbers of injured people. He said nothing of the assistance promised by the Arab foreign ministers in support of the Palestinian people's steadfastness has arrived. At the conclusion of its meetings in Tehran, the Syrian National Dialogue Conference asserted rejection of any form of foreign intervention in Syria's internal affairs. It underlined the need to exert efforts to start comprehensive national dialogue and realize national reconciliation. The conference decided to form a committee to follow up Syrian national dialogue, and it will be assigned the task of making the necessary preparations for the upcoming meeting on dialogue in Damascus. The final communique of the conference considered the situation in Syria as reaching the state of an open, sharp crisis that requires special solutions to be attained through comprehensive national dialogue. It called for starting a political process and a roadmap to be outlined and decided by the Syrians themselves with a view of reaching a peaceful democratic change through the ballot boxes. The communique pointed out that the participants called on Iran in particular and the BRICS member countries to exercise pressure on the Turkish regime due to the latter's central, dangerous and direct role in the crisis in Syria, as it supports and encourages, like several world and Gulf countries, armed men in violation of international laws. The participants in the conference called on the UN and human rights organizations to interfere to stop the dangerous violations, whether in terms of statements, direct military interventions, or the training offered to the armed groups, as Britain is doing now. The statement condemned the economic blockade imposed on the country and all forms of other sanctions that harm the Syrian people. The Iranian National Security's Supreme Council's Secretary Saeed Jalili met Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs Qadri Jamil and the Minister of State for National Reconciliation Dr. Ali Haidar, and affirmed that national dialogue and democracy are the way to solve the Syrian crisis, pointing out that Tehran's conference is considered as a practical step in confronting violence in Syria. Jalili also affirmed that all governments and parties who don't support this are considered as supporters of violence and against democracy. He also pointed out that Syria and the Syrian people are paying the price of their support for the Palestinian resistance, declaring that resistance is the main axis of unity in the region and the Islamic world against the Zionist entity. Meanwhile, Jamil and Haidar expressed their appreciation of Iran's initiative related to holding the conference of the Syrian National Reconciliation, considering a political solution as the only way to solve the Syrian unrest. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov discussed with his U.S. counterpart Hillary Clinton the crisis in Syria and the Israeli aggression on Gaza. After talks with Clinton in the Cambodian capital, Lavrov said that Russia and Washington haven't agreed yet on a common position concerning the situation in Syria. Lavrov added that Clinton underlined that Washington is interested in the Geneva Convention. He emphasized the need not to take decisions on behalf of the Syrian people, saying that instead pressure must be exerted on everyone to sit down at the table of dialogue in order to find a solution for the crisis. Concerning the Israeli aggression on Gaza, Lavrov proposed a meeting to be held by the International Quartet Committee to discuss the crisis in Gaza, asserting the need to discuss a draft document that calls for a truce between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Terrorists targeted with 2 mortar shells Al-Ba'ath Foundation for Press and Publications in Al-Mazzi Highway in Damascus. The first shell fell on the building's facade and the second on the garage, causing material damage. No casualties or injuries among citizens were reported. In Damascus, a Syrian Arab army unit clashed with a terrorist group in Al-Amin Street in Al-Tadamun, killing many armed men and seizing their weapons. An official source said that an engineering unit defused 2 explosive devices that were planted by the terrorists near the police station in the neighborhood. One weighed 25 kilograms and the other 40 of highly explosive material. A field hospital was also found in the neighborhood containing large quantities of stolen medicine and medical equipment. In western Al-Ghouta and Damascus suburbs, army units continue to pursue terrorists in Daraya, inflicting on them heavy losses. Scores of terrorists were killed and their weapons and ammunition were confiscated. On the Factories Road on the city's outskirts, an army unit found a tunnel which was used by the armed men to transfer arms and ammunition. In Al-Diabiya, also in Damascus countryside, an army unit clashed with two terrorist groups, eliminating dozens of them. Some of them were non-Syrians. Their leader and the Libyan national called Qasim were identified. In Al-Mashtal, in Al-Sayyida Zainab neighborhood, an army unit also intercepted a terrorist group, killing and wounding all the members of the group. In Deir al-Zor, a Syrian Arab army unit eliminated several terrorists and injured others in Sheikh Yassin neighborhood in the city. In Idlib, the Syrian army clashed with the terrorist group near a factory on the road of Harim in Idlib countryside. Many terrorists were killed and 5 were arrested.